on this edition of the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show.
I hated that call.
I hated it too.
I hated that call.
And the reason why,
I kind of liked that they tried to go for that even though it didn't work.
This was a dramatic play to win. And in that sense, I like swinging for the fences.
you go for a quick slant out of the slot, that pass gets broken up. You know what no one is saying ever? You know, they should have tried a Philly special. No one's doing that. Right. No one's doing that. Right. Welcome into another Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show pre-week 5 edition, now that we're going through for the New Orleans Saints here. And of course, you'll be able to catch the New Orleans Saints and New York Giants here on Channel 4 this weekend. You've got us right now, though. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. That's Doug Mouton, sports director here at WWL. And for the next half hour, we're going to be here breaking down this New Orleans Saints matchup with the New York Giants. But first, we want to look back a little bit.
Yeah, look, let's talk a little bit about what the Saints did better in Buffalo. The Washington experience in Seattle was horrific, right? Yes, and I had real worries about Kellen Moore. You've got to get control of this team and motivate him. And sure enough, those questions were answered the next week. Much better effort. I know the Saints are 0-4, right? Yeah. We're talking about positives of an 0-4 team, but there were positives in Buffalo.
Yeah, you needed to see growth going from week 3 and that blowout up against Seattle, going into a game against one of the NFL's elite teams in the Buffalo Bills, and I think you saw it. They went from double-digit penalties to 4 penalties, none of which pre-snap, none on the defensive side, still some ill-timed, of course.
Sure.
That's just an unfortunate truth with that, but I think they did a very good job adjusting that, and that was a lot of the work that Kellen Moore and his player leadership team put in over the course of the week leading into that game against Buffalo.
They played better, smarter, and harder in week 4 than they had in week 3, and that's a good sign. All right, we want to show you what's on the menu tonight on this edition of the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show. We wish some of that was on the menu. We do not eat on this show, although we do, in fact, drink on this show. A large plates on the menu tonight. These are the big topics. Yes, we are going to talk about Kellen Moore and what the Saints did in the running game, which was super impressive. And we're going to talk about Jackson Dart and the New York Giants who come to the Superdome. This is going to be a fun one. And the small plates.
That's right. We're going to get to some of the young players that are showing some big-time building block potential. Jonas Anchor, to me, was the best player on the New Orleans Saints team. You can see him there on your right. And then, of course, Kendre Miller, who was a great compliment, ran hard next to Alvin Kamara throughout that game. And then, of course, we've got even more with that run game on the way, right? Not a very strong run defense for the New York Giants.
No, the Giants 29th in the NFL right now in rushing defense, so it is an opportunity for the Saints. Our dinner guest tonight, Katherine Terrell, does a great job covering the Saints for ESPN, and Ricardo LeCompte, who, as I like to say, will bring his usual band of ridiculousness to the studio. And then our last call tonight will be provided by Ross Jackson. It was Ross's turn, so Ross wanted to turn New York on us.
That's right. I figured it'd be a good idea to bring something New York, but a little bit of a twist. We're going to go with a grand cosmopolitan, not just a cosmopolitan, but a grand cosmopolitan.
That's even better than a cosmopolitan.
It's more grand.
Because it's grand.
That's right. It's more grand. And so that's going to be a lot of fun. I love this cocktail, and we'll go through some of the history of it, and I'll explain the differences as we kind of go through it as well.
I don't drink a lot of cosmopolitans, but you're making them drinking. All right, just to show you what the Saints did in the running game, they ran it 34 times, which was their biggest commitment to the running game this season. 189 yards. They stayed with it all game. 5.6 yards a rush is excellent for the Saints. And I want to show you this. The game's at noon Sunday. It's a game you don't see here on Channel 4. Ross, dramatic drum roll. The point spread right now, the Saints are 2-point favorites. Woo! For the first time this season, the 0-4 Saints are favorites in this game. You like the Saints' chances?
I really do. This was the game that I circled on the calendar, if you will, as their first win. I figured an 0-4 start was on the way. I thought this would be their best chance to get a win. Now, I thought it was going to be a Russell Wilson-led New York Giants team. Jackson Dart, of course, now the rookie quarterback, getting his first start last week in a big win over the Los Angeles Chargers. Changes things a little bit, but I still think that the Saints, especially now that the Giants are going to be without Malik Neighbors for the rest of the season, very unfortunate situation for them, and a lot of LSU Tigers fans as well who love seeing that guy play. But I think that this is still a great opportunity for them.
Yeah, no question. Look, I would have been a little bit more afraid of a Russell Wilson quarterback team, just because as he's a veteran, I think Jackson Dart has I think Jackson Dart's got a big upside and is going to be a terrific quarterback. I love getting him in his second start.
Right.
Because now Brandon Staley's got a whole game's worth of tape.
Yeah.
I like the Saints' chances to trick a young rookie now that they know what he wants to do.
Absolutely.
Agreed?
Yes. The one thing that I think Sierra's husband was less of a threat than Jackson Dart. I think Jackson Dart's
and I don't mean a threat long term. I mean in this particular game right now.
100%. And you're right. Now that you have one game's worth of tape, it's not 3 games. You'd like to have 3 games for a rookie quarterback and all those things. But one game with a veteran, very good defensive coordinator and still a veteran-led defensive team with some young stars like Jonas Sanker, who we saw really kind of have his breakout moment last week. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there to disguise and then try to trick that young rookie quarterback.
Yeah, no question about it. I think the Saints have a great opportunity this week against Jackson Dart and no Malik Neighbors. I mean, that is by far the Giants' single best offensive weapon, and it's not even close. It's not even a debate. To not have him on the field is a big break. Saints cornerbacks haven't been great so far this season. This is a chance for the DBs to have a big game.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, they give up a lot of space in that zone defense. 3 of the 4 quarterbacks that the Saints have faced so far, 3 of the 4 starters have completed more than 70% of their passes. All 4 of them have clocked a passer rating of more than 100.
Yeah.
And so you'd like to see the defense tighten up on the pass coverage side quite a bit in this game.
You got to do better with that. All right, we're going to come back in a minute with our guests, but first we want to tell you the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show is brought to you by the JPSO. Make a difference. Join the JPSO family today. Log on to jpsojobs.com.
And by Banner Chevrolet, Banner Chevy, home of the 60-second trade appraisal. And continuing on with the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show, thank you very much for joining us here. And look, we have friends that actually showed up, and they're here for drinks with us. We have Katherine Terrell from ESPN, phenomenal. And we also have
the company and maybe the drinks too.
Yeah, right. And also
I was bribed.
Yes. And Ricardo LeCompte from here at WWL TV. Also, awesome. Thank you both very much for being here with us. Hey, Santa, I know. I'm getting the beard going. Kat, we want to start with you on this. The New Orleans Saints, for the first time this season, are favored. You heard me right. Favored going into a game, 2-point favorites going into this matchup. What do you like about this matchup for the New Orleans Saints in Week 5?
Well, I think I picked 5 wins for them, so they have to start winning at some point for me to get to that point, okay? But I do think that I thought, kind of like you said, for the first 5 weeks of the season, I thought the first 4 games, I don't know. I thought maybe Seattle. I was very wrong about that. But I thought this was a game that they can win, and now that they've made so many changes, obviously the quarterback change, they've had some injuries, I think the Saints could win this game because they have to win this game. Now, the Giants, of course, are still desperate, but maybe a little less desperate now that they've actually won something versus the Saints that are still searching.
I think that level of desperation does mean something. Ricardo, what do you like?
Yeah, I think the fact that they made it a game against the Bills, right? I think after you wanted to see how they rebounded from that awful performance in Seattle, right? Where nothing went right. They made all the mistakes. Everything was almost self-inflicted with a lot of things they were doing, particularly special teams, and just getting behind the 8 ball early there. But the way they played against Buffalo is encouraging because you got to see some of the young players kind of step up, like you guys were mentioning, Kendre Miller, Jonas Sanker. You kind of saw flashes of what the future could potentially be for the Saints because, again, this season it may not, go as, I'm being very generous of saying it's not going to go the way that, most fans would like, but you're still building for the future, and there were pieces that flashed in that game against the Bills that make you encourage. And the fact that they just hung around against a good Bills team who are Super Bowl favorites, who are probably likely going to be sitting and playing for an AFC Championship game, possibly going to the Super Bowl. They looked very competitive, even had chances to beat the Bills. So that's, I think, just being encouraged with the fact that they're not, they're not a team that can't do anything. They looked functional like an NFL team, and I think that's encouraging versus going, man, they're probably the worst team in the NFL. You didn't get that when they left Buffalo on Sunday.
Coming out of a game against Seattle, which is a middle-of-the-road NFL team where they lost by,
that would make you think,
points, right? And there was a conversation there about oh gosh, maybe they are the worst team in the NFL.
No question.
Then they go up against one of the best teams in the league.
If not the best.
A team that has scored 30 points at least in every single matchup so far, including the game on Sunday. But the Saints were really in that game. It felt like until maybe 5 minutes left, the roughing the kicker penalty for me was kind of the big turning point. But the Saints were one exceptional Brandon Cooks catch away in the end zone from actually having a lead in that game for the first time. So now you go up against one of the NFL's kind of, bottom feeders.
Oh, bottom feeders
for sure.
There's
an opportunity here.
Yeah, no question. And look, to me, the single biggest reason the Saints have a great shot in this game is I feel like this week, and we've seen it building, we saw the emergence of their offensive identity. They want to run the ball.
Yeah.
It's what all of their offensive linemen do best. Not necessarily what their wide receivers do great,
Right.
but it's what all their offensive line does well. They got two terrific running backs. They ran it 34 times, had great success, and the Giants so far this season have been terrible against the rush. In 4 games, the Commanders got 220, Cowboys got 135, the Chiefs got 105, and they don't run it, and the Chargers got 152. In every game, they've given up a bunch. So what the Giants do worst is what the Saints do best.
Yeah.
I think that's a good remedy. I like the Saints' chances.
Yeah, and against the worst rushing team in the NFL, against the Bills, they were functional. They were effective. They were able to run the ball versus not being able to do that. Then you would have had worries going, man, they can't do it. If they can't run the ball against the worst team in the NFL, then when are they going to do it? So it feels like they will have success because of what you saw against the Bills. Against a team like the Giants, again, who cannot stop the run, that is encouraging going, look, we've done it. We've done it once there in Buffalo. Let's go out and do it again on Sunday. And certainly they could do that and set up everything else in this offense.
Yeah, over 100 yards for the Saints rushing in 3 games, including 2 games against very good rushing defenses.
Yes.
Start off.
Yes.
Now they've got a pair of weak ones here.
And it's clearly what they want to do. All right, let's flip that around. What is our boil water advisory for this game? What is the thing that could derail the Saints in this game? Katherine, you first.
Well, I love this part of the show because I feel like it's always been something different every time we talk about it.
Yes.
And for me, it's special teams. I know that's a completely obvious one, but this is 2 games now where special teams has kind of derailed the game. And maybe that's not fair. It was one moment in the game.
Right.
I get that, but it was still a moment that changed the
You're talking about the
outcome of
roughing the
game.
punter.
Yes, and also Kellen Moore made a point after the game. He was saying we only had 4 penalties. 3 of them were on special teams. It was almost as if, in his very polite Kellen Moore way, he was calling that unit out.
That's good.
Right. So
that's good.
I just think special teams in all aspects, they were better. I will give them credit. You couldn't really be worse. But if they turn in a performance similar to Seattle or in a key situation like last week, I think that's my thing right now. It could change next week.
No, that's great. That's terrific.
Ricardo?
Mine is more of a precautionary water boil, so it's like I don't want to see the Saints regress back from this performance on the Bills, and that means the special teams miscues. Again, the pre-snap penalties, the not being able to get off the field on 3rd down defensively, not being able to move the ball and run the ball offensively. I just don't want to see the Saints regress. I want them to build on this moment against Buffalo, against a team that they should beat in the Giants. I want to see them take that next step, get that win, get over the hump, get everybody the first win. Spencer Rattler, Kellen Moore as head coach of the Saints. Just get that first win out of the way, and then let's see where this thing can build. That's the precautionary water boil lure. I don't feel like there's one big thing that could derail the Saints. I just don't want them regressing. Otherwise, you ain't gonna be drinking the water on Sunday.
Yeah, for sure. For me, it's the Saints defensive line. The majority of the rushing yards that James Cook and that Buffalo Bills team picked up were in between the tackles. They ran all over the interior of the New Orleans Saints defensive line, which is supposed to be one of its strengths with guys like Devon Gottschall and then Christian Boyd getting some more runs. So you have these big-bodied run stoppers that you just want to see kind of step up, because if you give New York a run game, which they don't typically generate very well on their own, but if you give them a run game, it makes the job a lot easier for Jackson Dart. And oh, by the way, if you make the job easier for Jackson Dart, then you end up having some issues with getting pressure around the Saints. Number 32 in the NFL. I don't know if you know this, but there's only 32 teams in the NFL. When it comes to pressure percentage.
There's not one in Europe, right?
There's not one in Europe.
Even though, I was going to say,
Jacksonville, your time is coming. But I do think that is something that you'll be looking for, is sort of that ability to limit the run game so that you can dial up the pressure a bit, but then you also have to generate the pressure quite a bit. Multi-sack games are not the same thing as getting consistent pressure on an opposing quarterback.
My boil water advisory is around the Giants pass rush. It's the one thing they do best. They're good up front as pass rushers. Haven't been great against the run, have been good as pass rushers, and Spencer Rattler has done a nice job of protecting the ball. That's the one thing to me. If he protects the ball and the Saints can run the ball, I think they have a great shot. But that pass rush scares me a little bit. To me, that's where things can go wrong, although I like the special teams argument is a good one, too.
It's a really good one. I mean, not only did they have an ill-timed penalty at the end of the game. But also 2 weeks out of 4 now, they've had a kick land short of the landing zone and gave great field position to the opposing team too.
Although,
that's another area of it.
Kai Kroger's punt, the one that died on the 2, was a thing of beauty. And Blake Rupe hit the field goal, so there were positives in that too. The one thing we do want to bring up here is that Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau, what is their status right now? Because we could be seeing them practice again this week, right?
Well, they both have their practice window open, but I think out of the two, Foster is the closest. I talked to him a few weeks ago, and he is ready to get back on that field. Now, he knows it's not up to him, but if he's not playing the next few weeks, he will be clamoring for it. So, I think that Foster will be playing as fast as they can get him up to speed and ready, and, numbers-wise, have the bodies to do that with the roster spot.
Yeah, I feel like Kellen Moore has a clock in his office that says Taysom Hill will return, and he's just watching like those ticks down. And in the meantime, he's like a mad scientist with all these sketchbooks and everything, going, "Oh, what am I going to do with Taysom Hill? So much stuff I can do offensive," because it's just such a creative, dynamic piece that you can add to this offense once Taysom Hill comes back.
And the two of them, Foster Moreau and Taysom Hill, absolutely fit into this identity that he's trying to establish, right?
Absolutely. And look, a big part, the Saints right now, 21st in the NFL, tied for 21st in the NFL, 50% red zone touchdown percentage. So it's the amount of touchdowns you score by red zone possession. And you look at last year, Taysom Hill available for 8 games, not available for 9 games. It was a 10% difference in red zone touchdown percentage with him in the game versus out of the game.
I was going to bring that up. I mean, just even not looking at the numbers, the difference when Taysom Hill was on the field and he wasn't, it was just so stark. And I know it's a new year and a new offense, but everyone knows what Taysom can do. And I'm excited to see him back on the field because that was just an awful injury, and he's an exciting player, so hopefully he'll be back sooner rather than later.
But we shouldn't probably expect him to be on the field this weekend.
No, right. That's
right.
the point.
He's the wild card one that I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that Foster is progressing, but with Taysom, we just haven't talked to him as much, and so we don't know. But I definitely think he'll need a few weeks of practice at minimum if he's going to get back on the field.
Yeah, I drafted him and kept him on my bench in every fantasy football league I'm in because I know what he can do.
Quarterback and tight end, right?
Yeah, 6 of them. I want to play that tight end.
And Doug talking fantasy.
Yeah. You know what time it is?
Last call!
We're back with more of the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show in a minute. The best part of the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show is called Last Call. Ross Jackson has affectionately called it a drink and a think. We'll give you one final opinion while Ross is mixing the drink tonight for the New York Giants. What are we mixing again?
Yeah, so this time I'm going with a Grand Cosmopolitan. So everybody knows and loves the Cosmopolitan. This one's a little bit of a twist. We're going vodka, we're going cranberry juice, we're going lime juice. Those are the typical ingredients you see in this. But instead of Cointreau, we're going to go with Grand Marnier. So it's going to be a little bit more, a little bit sweeter. Grand. Yeah, that's where the Grand comes from. Right. And then a little dash of orange bitters as well. You only need 1 ounce of this, 1 ounce of this, 1 ounce of this, 2 ounces, 1/2 ounce of this, and then bang, a little.
And that is fresh squeezed lime juice, right?
And then you're all done. That is fresh squeezed with my hands.
I already like it.
With my hands. Well, I was looking for the citrus juicer, and Doug said, it's not here. And then I went, well, what am I going to do? And then he was like, use your hands.
You can squeeze it.
Did you squeeze just?
Yeah. It was so funny. It was one of those just.
I'll set our tools.
That's right.
All right, time for our last call. Catherine, why don't you go first? Because you're going to take us back in time, aren't you?
All right, let me take y'all back 10 years ago. Saints, Giants, 52-49. Drew Brees threw 7 touchdowns, which is still a record, and he's only one of 8 quarterbacks to do that. I bring that up because, I don't think we're going to see that this week, but you never know. Drew Brees is actually one of 13 first-time nominees for the Hall of Fame this year. So
shout out, Drew.
I got to cover that game. It was one of the best games I've ever covered. Really fun. Going to be a little different this year. However, Brandon Cooks was on that team.
There's a connection.
He scored 2 touchdowns for the first time. So maybe this will be Brandon Cooks' breakout game this season. I guess we'll have to find out.
Oh, I love that in every way. That was a spectacular game. Drew Brees is a no doubt.
It was great.
Oh, no doubt.
Drew Brees at his best, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And Eli Manning, too.
Yeah, I think he threw 6. There was 13 total touchdowns, I think, and also an interception return.
What a game.
That's absurd.
10 years ago.
Drew Brees, without question, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Ricardo, what you got?
Well, Kat went to the past. I'm going to look to the future. We're going to see some of the future on hand on Sunday, especially on the the Giants side, you've got Jackson Dart, who's going to make his second career start. You got Cam Skadaboo, who's looked like a great running back. What a 1-2 punch, especially in New York. Those kind of personalities. Yeah. Oh man, it's great. Meanwhile, we won't see the future of at the quarterback position, at least of the Saints. Not yet. Tyler Shuck is still, waiting his turn. So Spencer Rattler is still, I think, has extended his runway right now. Yeah. I thought after 4 games, this was going to be the game that we were probably going to maybe start talking about that quarterback shift. And maybe let's see what Tyler Shuck has got. So far, Spencer Rattler has played well in these first 4 games. And I mean, he's played well, but there are opportunities and misses that he's had in these games where you went, man, if he could just make those throws, if he can make those passes. I'm thinking about the Brandon Cooks one in particular against the Bills. If he could just elevate his play, that could maybe elevate this team and maybe get more wins. This is the opportunity and a chance on Sunday for Spencer Rattler to cement that job in terms of saying, hey, let's extend that runway even more by performing well against the Giants. If he doesn't, then maybe the Saints will probably have to start looking toward the future.
Yeah, I've been holding his glass because I was anxious to drink it.
I'm sorry, I kept talking. Go figure.
To Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast for delivering such a ridiculous drink. I'm going to do my last call.
Oh, no, I thought I got you again. Kat,
it's not a minute and a half. I'm going to do mine quickly. Mine is Jonas Sanker, the Saints safety. Single most wild play of the season so far. I'm watching the game from the back of the end zone. Josh Allen lets go of the ball deep. There is no way he thought Jonas Sanker could get to that ball. Yep. The ground he covered was incredibly impressive. And I've said this about Jonas Sanker a few times. I think getting him in the 3rd round was like when the Saints got Roman Harper in the 2nd round. I think he's going to be a foundational piece for the next 8 years, 10 years. I love what he's done so far. He's my biggest wow so far.
Yeah, I'm actually going to pivot on mine a little bit, but I'm going to stick with you when it comes to the defensive backs and rookies, and I'm just going to keep this very short, very sweet, very simple. Start Quincy Riley the rest of the season.
Yes.
I thought that he was excellent out there up against Buffalo. I'm really excited to see how he continues to grow and develop.
He's earned some time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No doubt.
All right, we're down to about 30 seconds. I'm giving you a fake $100. You got to bet on either the Saints or the Giants just to win. No spread, just to win. You're betting the Saints or the Giants. You're getting free money, but you got to bet it.
I'm going to bet the Saints.
Got to bet the Saints.
Yeah, I'm going to bet the Saints as well.
I'm betting the Saints as well.
Oh, my God. Oh, we are.
Do we need to save the graphic?
Save the graphic.
Save the graphic.
Saints. And then the Giants Twitter post it, and then you're like, oh, oops.
And why?
I just think that they could actually be the better team on the football field this weekend.
Jackson Dart's second start going to the Dome.
Yes.
That's
all right. We're going on to the streaming channel. Switch to WWL Plus. Thanks for watching. This is the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show. We're back. We're going to take this for another 28 minutes or so and talk about the Saints and the Giants. And now we have a little more time.
What is that?
I was dancing.
That was a lot.
You look like they have inflatable wacky things.
Yeah, see, you were like,
Wacky waving inflatable playlist.
Do the wave, I thought.
I was waiting for somebody else to join in. You were with me for a second.
I was with.
There's a scene in Better Call Saul where he's thinking about that thing and that's
the
what
wacky
you were doing.
waving inflatable arm playlist.
Yes.
That's the Family Guy reference right there. That's the one.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, we've talked a little bit about what we like about the Saints matchup. Beyond what we've talked about, what feels right about this?
Well, I actually did like some of Kellen Moore's play calls against the Bills. I know that the play call, the trick play was kind of controversial. People didn't like it. They said he got too cute. I used to hear that all the time when Peyton was the coach. And so it was kind of funny to hear, but I kind of liked that. They tried to go for that, even though it didn't work. I might be in the extreme minority, but there are some things about the way the offense was running that I was like, okay, this team might actually be putting this together. I don't know for sure. I'm going to have to see it again next week, but maybe they are putting some momentum together. I
was going to say, if we had to, he loved it. He loved that.
Yeah, I do want to deep dive into the Philly special.
So you two are both on the Philly special. I hated that call.
I hated it too.
I hated that call. And the reason why, the reason why, because it's like, all right, so you've been effectively running the ball against the Bills right there. You need points.
Right.
So that's the momentum thing. So the last thing you need to do is pull a trick play and take the ball out of Spencer Rattler's hands and have Chris Olave.
Yeah.
My thinking on that is and this is for this whole first 4 games. Any Eagle-type plays, keep it in Philadelphia.
No more twist.
No more twist.
That's my
That's my. They're not the Eagles. They're the Saints of 2025, which they haven't won a game yet. Wait until you get better. Then let's try to employ some other plays or even better stuff. But the trick play like that, like you needed points at that point. That was a lot of momentum that just gets killed. And who knows if the Saints even gotten 3, cut that deficit to 1, take a touchdown, take the lead. You have a little bit more momentum, a little bit more pressure going in the second half on the Bills.
You and your logic over here.
That's so crazy logic.
logical.
You got something to add to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wasn't a big fan of it either. I also think you gave up a 4th-round pick to go and get a guy like Devon Vele to help you in exactly those situations. Even if you're putting him on, and I know what people might say to that is like, oh, well, if you put him on the field, everyone knows that it's going to. Then go to somebody else with him on the field. Use him as a decoy. We saw that work against San Francisco. You have the ability to be able to do that. I agree with you. I wasn't into. But I also am aware that had it worked, we'd probably be sitting here all calling Tom Moore an absolute genius.
Right. And that's the thing. If it works and it's great, that's great.
Yeah.
And we're not criticizing the call that you go, man, Kellen Moore dialing up at the right time.
Wow.
Man, he is.
Here's why I liked it, and you can totally disagree with that. But I liked the gamble. One, when it actually worked in the Super Bowl, it was a 3rd-string tight end who threw the pass, who had never thrown a pass in the NFL. Nick Foles had never caught a pass in any game ever beginning with high school. So this wasn't like Chris Olave wasn't worse at it. This wasn't. That's how this works, is that people aren't expecting it. But look, if you're going to go to Buffalo, the Super Bowl favorites, and you're a winless team, I understand if you're going to win that game, not just be competitive, but if you're going to win that game in Buffalo against Super Bowl favorites, you're probably going to have to hit a ridiculous home run or two. And Kellen Moore swung for the fences. Obviously, the execution was terrible, and your arguments are 100% right. But my mode of you play to win. It's like Sean Payton going for the onside kick in the Super Bowl. You play to win. And this was a dramatic play to win. And in that sense, I like swinging for the fences.
I agree with that. But here's my thing, right? You go for a quick slant out of the slot. That pass gets broken up. You know what no one is saying ever? They should have tried a Philly special. No one's doing that.
Right.
No one's doing that.
Right.
Instead, you try the Philly special, it doesn't work, and then we can list 7 different things that might have worked.
Yeah, I get it.
That would still have given you the momentum that you're searching for.
There are a lot of other things in that game that didn't work.
Yes.
Sure, yeah.
That was just one of them.
But it was the one that stood, that was the most significant one because everyone's like, I've seen that before when it works.
Swinging for the fences is
No, swinging for the fences is fine, but it's like also picking your spots. And I felt like Kellen Moore felt like that was the spot. I just don't think that was a spot.
You know what? One of the things that I thought was really funny. Later on, they get into a similar situation. They hit that quick slant to Chris Olave,
which was
a great play.
That was by far Rattler's best throw.
Right, but right before that, I leaned over to Catherine, and I was like, what they'll never expect is a Philly special.
It's the second time.
That's hilarious. So that's the time that they should have done it. We didn't get it the first time. Let's try it again.
They would not expect it. You're right. They wouldn't.
It's a lifestyle.
I hope they do it again next week.
I do too, and I hope it works.
So that we can have the opposite conversation.
Right.
I think the one knock that I'm starting to rethink is because of what you said. Leave the Philly
the
in
Eagle
Philly.
plays
If
in
this
Philly.
had been a New Orleans special, it didn't have to be the exact same play as the Eagles. If they could have invented their own.
The quarterback fakes to go get a drink in the stands and then comes back and catches
it. Who knows?
Christian Boyd fullback snaps anybody?
Oh, look, the one that the Lions ran where they fake falling down and get up. I mean, those kind of things. Maybe that's the argument, is that don't run a play we've already seen.
Right.
If you do a trick play, invent something.
Right. And I always say the tush push, you need some tush to push.
Yeah.
And Jalen Hurts and Spencer Rattler running those two, it doesn't work. You need a little more quarterback, a little more oomph.
Doesn't that come down to the penalty issue? They couldn't get the tush push to work because they get penalized for it every time.
They do. Offsides the first time, false start.
Of penalties.
Or
they're not the most penalized team in the league anymore.
Or you saw what Philly did last week with the Bucs. They did a fake out of that Philly reverse and handed it off. And
it was a fake tush or a fake push?
It was a fake pushing of the tush.
Fake pushing of the tush.
Yes, that's what it was. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, we really broke that down.
Yeah, we did. 7 minutes of tush push.
Yes, 7 minutes on the Philly special. Look, I thought it was super intriguing, and Beyond that, the way the Saints ran the ball and the way that plays into what they do best has got to give you some positive feeling going forward, right? I mean, this is one thing, if you can run the ball, it almost doesn't matter who you play, definitely doesn't matter what the weather is, doesn't matter what the crowd is. Right. It's the one thing that should translate across the board, right?
Yeah, and my thing was that I feel like I've been waiting for Kendre Miller to show me something for 3 years. I think I said that to Ross during the game. Okay, he's finally showing me something. Is this going to continue? And if it does, well, then that is a huge positive sign after they haven't figured out what to do with him for the first 2 years of his career. So, having these young players actually get better every week, that's an extremely positive sign that I don't think that we saw a lot of that last year across the board. And maybe I'm just setting the bar low, but
well, they set the bar low.
That's where they are, and we're looking for positive signs.
And part of that run game, like they had for the first time their whole 5 projected offensive line on the field playing, right? Like
for almost a half.
For almost a half, and it stinks because we're not going to see that for a while because Cesar Ruiz is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks with that ankle sprain. But you saw at least for that half, it was like, oh yeah, this is what this O-line is supposed to look like coming out. And we were very high on this offensive line in training camp. Yeah. We just hadn't seen it on display yet in a regular season game, and now unfortunately we won't get to see it. But I think part of that of why Kendre Miller, why Alvin Kamara just saying like it was because that offensive line was healthy and intact, and we got to see how, at least for a half, how good they are.
Yeah, I'll say too, it had a lot to do with those two backs. We've watched New Orleans in the past be a team whose running backs don't necessarily create yardage for themselves in the run game. Typically, they're relying on the offensive line to get some kind of push. 160 plus of the Saints, 189 rushing yards in that game came after contact.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, these running backs are running hard, so you had 135 between those two backs and Alvin Kamara as well as Kendre Miller. Plus, you had 40 plus that came from Spencer Rattler as well. And I think that sort of amalgamation, if you will, of like where the run game came from, how it was they were able to build it, and the diversity of inside, outside, zone, man, like they just ran a very, very eclectic selection of a run game in order to build it all up.
I will say my takeaway was with the Bills' rush defense. I didn't think it was as bad going into the game because of that Week 1 Sunday Night Football Ravens game.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. But after watching what they couldn't tackle against the Saints, they couldn't stop it. I went, they've got issues there, especially when you don't have an Ed Oliver in the like. They have issues. So, and that's like good news because the Giants also have issues stopping the run. So you feel like this will carry over into the Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got you. And how about 11 double-digit penalties? I didn't do this. I didn't do this. This was
right.
I slid my glass to Ross because it's empty, and who's ever making drinks in this second half hour.
I'm just going to finish mine first, and then I'll go and make another.
As you're going over there, I do want to ask you. Look, I was really encouraged. We're talking about building blocks going forward. Yeah. And we're talking about Jonas Sanker being terrific. I think Quincy Riley has a chance to be a good player. I think both tackles have been okay, but I think they're building blocks. But I thought Torricelli Simpkins was solid at that guard spot. I think he might be a legitimate gem. What did you see when you looked at him?
He had the second lowest pressure percentage allowed by a rookie offensive lineman in that game, 4.2%. The only player that was better was former LSU Tigers offensive lineman Will Campbell. 0.0. Didn't allow a single pressure. He's really good. Saints are going to have to deal with him in just a couple of weeks. And so I think that he did that well. But I think the thing that stands out the most for me about Torricelli Simpkins is how ridiculously physical he is.
Yeah.
He plays through the whistle. He's very physical. He wants to beat you up. Kind of like how Trevor Penning is. And so now you got both of those guys at guard. That's a pretty good situation. Torricelli Simpkins struggled a bit against Seattle. Not a big surprise, especially considering how good that Seattle defensive line is, but I thought that he played extremely well, especially for a rookie in that situation.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Can we just talk about the stats you just spat out? That was extremely impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But it's like I did my job well.
That is very
I got a little computer up here.
But I do agree about Simpkins. I think that Ruiz has had his struggles to start this month off, and I think that Simpkins has been a guy that in training camp we kind of spotlighted him.
Yeah.
Hey, he's got potential, and obviously it's very early and it's a long season, but I am excited to see what he can do filling in, because I do think that he's played well for what he's been asked to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm looking for pieces that can be starters and building block pieces. He's a guy you got for nothing, the undrafted rookie free agent. And I think he looks like a player that can be a starter and maybe a starter for a while. Maybe not, but he's certainly shown potential that he could be.
I still have that play from the Chargers preseason game where Simpkins makes a block and just pancakes a dude, then gets up and looks to find to hit somebody else, and he runs over and somebody's engaged with another guy and just goes and hits him too. And I went, that was the first time I went, this guy's got a little mean streak in him, and that's kind of what you want in your offensive lineman. But yes, I agree. It was one of those where I remember in our group chat, I have a group chat during the Saints game, and Ruiz went out, and all my friends were like, well, if we're going to lose offensive linemen, nah, that's okay. At least it's Ruiz, whatever. But and then I was like, I went, Simpkins has actually been pretty good. And he showed that in that game.
Yeah, it appears that if you were going to lose an offensive lineman, you don't have a lot of depth at tackle, and Eric McCoy's the one guy you don't want to be without. Either of the guards, because of Simpkins and Radens, either of the guards are guys that you can replace without the massive
And generally,
drop-off.
that's what it is. You don't want to lose tackles. You don't want to lose your center. If you're going to have to lose one, it's always usually interior guard. You can replace that.
And it just goes back to what I was saying earlier. When a team is 0-4, you're looking for the bright spots and the young players. And the fact that we have young players to talk about, I do think that is a very good thing. And so, hopefully there's going to be a couple more of those as the season goes on. I'd love to see, more out of Stutzman and what he can do. He's a guy who in training camp was really exciting to watch. And there's a couple more, but I do think Sanker has been as advertised in training camp. And so a lot of times you don't see that with young players.
No, right.
So training camp stars, and then you get to the regular season and you never hear from them again, and this is not the case.
Sanker's been my biggest stunner for the season so far. Like I said, I think he's he's like a Pro Bowl kind of building block piece. But look, I thought maybe the single most encouraging thing in this game was that in week 3, the Saints were undisciplined and played poorly and poorly coached. They got out-coached in multiple ways. And Kellen Moore turned that around in week 4. And the Saints were better in week 4 and smarter and did a lot of things they hadn't done in week 3. I thought this loss was a big win for Kellen Moore. Did you see it that way?
I think so too. And Ross and I had this discussion as well. The post-game locker room was somewhat interesting. Guys were obviously upset, but they seemed very measured about it. They didn't seem to be hanging their heads too much. And you can take that a couple of ways. You can take that as, well, how much do they care? But you can also take that as, okay, did they know this is going to be the tough part of the season? They fought through it, and now they have some winnable games on their schedule, and they're back home. So they're not taking it too much to heart because they know that, maybe the best is yet to come for this team. So
real quick, just on these drinks, so that doesn't take you by surprise. Think of these more like vodka cranberries. More than they are.
Oh, you ran out?
Yeah, there was only so much lime juice left. And so you'll notice a little brightness and citrus on the backside, but that's
still delicious.
For the most part,
did you already try? I hadn't tried mine yet. Did you already try it?
It's still delicious.
Okay. I was gonna say let's try it, and I was gonna say my point about the.
Let's try it.
Let's try it. You want to try it?
You can tell on that drink where that happens.
You're right.
Look at the color.
Oh, you can tell.
Alcoholic.
It's all good to me.
And going to that point, it is encouraging. It's encouraging. I think they haven't quit, and that's basically what you want, because we saw when a team quits, we saw that last year.
Right.
And it doesn't feel like that's the vibe. I think everyone knew, whether they want to admit it or not, they knew that this stretch, it was like, all right, of course you want to say they're going to, they feel like they're going to go 4-0, but we knew, everyone kind of knew this was going to be the stretch here. But in those 4 games, when you come out of it, you go, there are things. It feels like there's stuff to build. It's encouraging, and it doesn't feel like the season is lost. It just feels like, there are good things. Once we start playing teams that we are probably on level with or maybe below us, everything's going to kind of turn. And it feels like this is that first opportunity we're going to see Sunday against the Giants.
It felt to me, Ross, in the locker room, and I got this from Cam Jordan more than anybody else, that this team is self-aware. Yeah. They knew they're not a great team. They know this is a rebuild. Whether Mickey Loomis wants to say it or not, who cares? Sure. The fact is it's a rebuild, and it's a ground-up rebuild with a first-time head coach and a lot more young players. And I asked Cam Jordan I asked this to all of players. Are you more encouraged by what you guys did or more frustrated by the loss? Eric McCoy, who is at the peak of his play right now, I think he's 28, right?
Yep.
He is literally at the top of his game, one of the best centers in the NFL, was more frustrated because he is at the apex of his career right now and in a losing situation. Cam Jordan obviously is at the tail end of his career. Now, I thought he had a great game in Buffalo.
Yeah.
He might be extending that tail, but he's clearly got more football behind him than in front of him. And I asked him that question, and he said, "Oh, I'm very encouraged. We did a lot of things." And I think a lot of how I think the team sees itself comes through guys like Cam.
Yeah.
And
I
Cam
agree with
was
that,
very self-aware that, no, there are positives here, and there's things to build on, knowing that this is a 5 or a 6 win team or a 4 win team, whatever people want to think. But it's not about that. It's about building for next year and the year after that. And I thought the self-awareness was interesting. Did you get that?
Yeah, I absolutely did. And actually, the week before in Seattle, Katherine and I were talking to Juwan Johnson. And I felt very similar. I don't know if you took the same thing away, but I felt very similar when we were talking to him, to where it was a lot of like, he said something like the biggest window in a car is the window in front, not the rear view. So we're spending most of our time looking through the front. But he was talking, he was speaking as if it was like, maybe everyone kind of assumed that an 0-4 start was possible, but that wasn't going to be what was going to define the 17-game season. He didn't say that explicitly. That's kind of what I took away from both him and Cam, just from a vibes standpoint, almost. I don't know if you felt the same way when we were talking to Juwan, but I kind of felt some of those.
Yeah, I mean, Juwan, of course, said that one of the biggest issues last year was the cracks that start to show when a team is losing.
Right.
They go and leak stuff, or they talk a lot, or he didn't say point fingers, but that was implication. And I don't get the sense that this team is doing that right now. And so, I think that they seem all very measured about it. Like you said, like Juwan is, he always kind of is though, Cam as well. But Cam did say, if you think that Cam is completely okay with losing, that's not the case. He was asked.
Of course.
No, I know. He was just asked, do you think the team rebounded for last week? And he said, losing is not rebounding.
Yeah, right.
So that's always going to be Cam. He wants to win, but he will always find the positive, and there were positives to find in that game.
That's an important piece of leadership right now. I think we see it from Kellen Moore too. Like, Kellen comes through and he has a very positive vibe around him at all times, right? Like, oh, this guy's phenomenal, and this guy did an awesome job. And
the guy we cut is great.
Right. But even when he made the assessment after the Seahawks game, when he said, we have to find guys that are going to be able to play the way that we want them to. If not, we need to go and find the guys that can. But I've got full faith in the guys to be able to do it.
Right.
But even in his positivity, there is a self-awareness of things that aren't working have to change. And we've seen that from Kellen already. The Saints got away from the run game far too early up against the Arizona Cardinals. I think we can all agree on that. He said himself that it was a reflection after the San Francisco 49ers game from that game that created why they stayed committed to the running game later on in that game. They had trouble communicating up against Seattle in a hostile environment. What did they do? They went from running around 14% of their offense under center to 27% of their offense under center. That was a big-time adjustment that allowed them to be able to have a vocal cadence at the line of scrimmage and be able to communicate appropriately in another hostile environment in Buffalo. And so you see the adjustments happening that, like, that didn't work, let's try this. And forgive me for saying, I could be wrong, but I didn't see that a lot over the course of the past couple of years.
Yeah.
It was a lot more of, oh, that didn't work the 5th time, but I'll bet it'll work the 6th time. And so at least this time around, you're seeing the changes in the adjustment.
It's like trying to shove a round peg into a square hole, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's not, and to your point, it's not a naive positivity that Kellen Moore has.
Right.
Like, it's yes, he's going to have that outshowing of being positive or whatever, but he's still a good football coach in terms of, like, he sees the mistakes he makes. All right, we'll adjust here. All right, we have this issue here. We're going to work with this. Pre-snap penalties. Let's keep bringing in the refs. Let's figure this thing out here. Let's get the right guys that we can do that. So you're seeing that, like, that's his personality. He's never going to be like, man, I'm doom and gloom. It's whatever. Like,
man, this stinks.
Man, we are terrible. He's not doing a Cam Ward presser going, hey, if I can be real buck, he's not doing that kind of, like, he is very positive, but at the same time, he's very very calculating, very smart in what he's doing, and you can see these adjustments through the first 4 weeks that you go, you know what, he does understand. He's not like living in this like delusional thing, where it's either I'm delusional thinking, oh yeah, let's just keep doing this over and over, it's going to change, it's going to whatever. No, he's actually making kind of like points and kind of adjusting, and that's good.
And it creates an environment for other coaches to do the same thing.
Yes.
Brandon Staley went from running nearly 90% of his offense against Seattle out of zone coverage to nearly only around like mid 60%.
You are spitting some stats.
I know.
I be knowing my numbers. But I do think that that was like another big adjustment for them. They played a lot more man coverage in this game up against Buffalo, which was good because Josh Allen will carve up some zone coverage.
Yeah.
And so it was a good adjustment by them. But it's Kellen Moore setting the standard at the top that says, hey, I might be the head coach, but it doesn't mean I'm always right. And then that permeates throughout the rest. Ooh, good word.
Yeah.
Permeates throughout the rest of the
You can't say it's a good word.
I can say it.
Do that.
I can say it for
Someone else
myself.
has to say it. No.
I got you.
No.
Thank you, man.
You can't compliment your own word
Thank
choice.
you, Ricardo. Of course I can.
He can.
And I did.
All right. Here's what all this is coming around to, and you sort of touched on this. And the four of us are in the locker room a lot, right? And we all have different relationships with different players and different guys we talk to. But the one thing that I think permeates everything, and I think this is a big deal.
Good word.
Because you just said it. I know, right? Yes, yeah, you can say that, but I would disagree because I copied from you. And look, I feel this more than anything, is that the vibe from last year to this year, and I know this team is 0-4, and I know in a lot of my touchscreen stuff, I'm saying positive stuff because the vibe is so fundamentally different. Last year felt like an aging team trying to cling on to the last vestige of what they could, and this feels like a younger, smarter team that's trying to learn and grow. I know they're 0-4, but you don't feel that per se in the locker room. You don't feel the doom and gloom. You don't feel the down. You feel the, you know what, we're building something, and these are the first blocks, and we're going to get there. And I love the whole vibe of this team so much more than especially last year. Last year, from the get-go, it felt like we are desperate to do something, and that's not the way you win.
More week 3 than weeks 1 and 2.
Yes, but you play loose in 3 is the way to win. It's just a play, which is why the Philly special, just do it. Like, if it doesn't work, so what? Like, you play loose and free and go for stuff, and that's how you win. But anyway, I feel a totally different vibe. Am I off base, or do you feel that?
No, I don't. I think the big thing is the standard. They always talk about the standard, right? And last year, there was no standard. I'd have players tell me just, what are we doing in practice? There's no, attention.
Why are we running this? Why are we doing that?
There's no attention to detail.
Right.
Guys are wearing tennis shoes and not cleats, just things like that. Like, there was no oversight almost. And I think that they've had to get out of that mindset. Taliesin talked to us after the game, and he said, in practice, someone false started. He said his first instinct was to be like, that's okay. And then he thought, no, that's not okay. That is not okay.
Right.
And I asked him, why was it okay that person false started? And he was like, it's not. And, and I said something. And they have got to continue doing that.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a carryover from just saying, oh, well, you messed up, that's okay, but you're 0-4. You got to change that, and maybe they are.
Yeah, it was a lot of like, oh, that's okay, on to the next snap. And then Taliesin also talked about kind of the leadership console that they built, right? To where it's not just the captains, but the captains went and appointed other players from other position groups to kind of help hold everybody accountable. And so there's a player-led sort of accountability team almost, in addition to what the coaching staff is doing, that's helping them kind of hold themselves, I'm going to use the word again, I'm sorry, but hold themselves accountable and hold themselves to account when they are when they are having those problems in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to lean on your veteran leadership, right? And Cam has been through this before. He said after the game that he couldn't remember the last time they started 0-4, but I doubt that. It was 2012. DeMario was on a Browns team that went 1-15. I was talking to him the other day, and they did not win that first game until Christmas Eve of that season. A whole season without winning. So those two know what to say and what to do. And, there's younger players that are kind of, they've been through it last year, not to the same extent, but last year was tough for a lot of people. So there are players that are taking accountability and learning how to lead on the spot, and I do think that's kind of interesting to watch develop.
Right. There's probably a frustration in the fan base going, why didn't you just push this reset button 2 years ago.
And
right?
they probably should have.
And there should, and they should have. And it's and to kind of just do the analogy of like, I'm going to throw this out there. Florida State last year, my alma mater.
Did you go to Florida State?
I went to Florida
No
State.
way.
I'm a Knoll.
I've never heard that.
All right. So they went 2-10, right? And it was a bunch of like transfer guys. They didn't hit in the transfer, and basically they were like hired mercenaries. So when they started losing, they checked out, right?
Yeah.
So the Saints team a year ago, it was kind of one of those feelings where like when they lost, it's not, you're not building any young guys. It's a bunch. You have a veteran quarterback. You have a bunch of veteran pieces because you're expecting to win now.
Click,
And
they checked out.
and then once they like lost what with the 8-game losing streak, 7 game. Checked out.
3 games into it, they checked out.
So for real. It felt like one game, honestly. Like it felt like the loss to the Eagles. It was like,
this is it. We're not going anywhere.
Right.
Like we can't beat the Eagles. We're not doing that. And like they checked out. And you're not getting that checkout factor this year because you've got some young pieces, because you have a different direction. So you feel more encouraged when you get blown out in Seattle, and that shows you the following week. They didn't lay down for the Bills either. So you see them bouncing back the next week versus going, man, we're playing the Bills. All right, I'm chilling. So like that just shows you that they're not checked out. And that's the most important thing for this
I
team.
feel that in a big way.
Yeah.
Ross, enjoy this show. Give me one last clank.
Clink.
I got you, Cat. I got you, Cat. Look, I'm going to get up.
Great job,
There you
Ricardo.
go. Look at that.
I got you.
Ricardo.
I got you.
Thank you
very
for
much.
watching this edition, this extra long edition of the Ultimate New Orleans Sports Show. Good night, everybody.